give you a realistic view of what the income streams actually look like, where those opportunities lie, and what it takes to actually set that up. Secondly, I think the issue is, again, going back to the budget conversation. For me, the one thing I've realized is when people are actually talking about, the lack of affordability, they actually can afford to go out, every weekend. These are people who always look fresh. They've got the latest wigs. These are people that, drive the most expensive cars if they're guys. You kind of excuse certain frivolous expenditures, and actually you don't take a very sober look at where am I being wasteful versus where can I actually create an additional income stream by actually reallocating that wasteful expenditure to productive expenditure, and then creating extra capacity to allocate to a retirement fund.
Yeah, but you see, things we must always be seen in the latest cars, Lutando. We must, when we arrive, they must know.
They must know, but
they must know that we are here, we are present. They must mark us present,
I think the most important thing is for your retirement plan to mark you present, because no one will be there to entertain you if not.
And perhaps it's, if we're to stay on that issue just a little bit longer, it also is very much a generational thing, because when you look at the lifestyle that young people aspire to today, even young professionals, it is literally what we see on Instagram. People want to be living in the most expensive suburbs, driving the most expensive cars, and every time somebody gets a raise, they upgrade the car, they upgrade the house, and that perhaps is also an opportunity where the gap is, right?
Lifestyle creep, exactly. It goes back to the budgeting conversation. So if you're clear on why you are working hard to create that extra income, if you're clear on where you've got excessive spending, when you do actually get that income, that additional uplift, you are able to allocate it productively, especially if you've got an independent financial advisor helping you along the way. But also if you are clear on where your money traps are, which is where you would have previously had that frivolous expenditure, you're more avoidant of it going forward. So lifestyle creep is a real thing. People talk a lot about a tax or bracket creep, which is where your salary increases, but then it creeps you into a new tax bracket and actually less comes into your bank account. You're doing exactly the same thing with lifestyle creep. You get an additional income, but then you're already spending it through things that you cannot actually quantify into the future that don't appreciate.
And you're feeling the pressure of, what will Womalumi say at the next family event if I show up in a car that doesn't look like I'm working? Is it a cultural thing? Why do we do this to each other? And why do we do this to other people? Where we sit and we judge them. I've seen, and I don't want to make this about race, right? But I've seen in places where I've worked where you'll have older white guys who are probably amongst the highest income earners in that company, and they're driving like an old car without maybe mentioning names. You can see that this car was bought 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, and then you have the Cathys arriving.
Eish.
You just got a job yesterday and yours is the most expensive car in the parking lot. Is it a cultural thing? What is it? How do we explain that? What drives that?
I don't know if it's so much culture other than aspirational, right? So if you grew up without, you kind of have these markers of, the day I start working, I want to drive this, I want to live here, I want to, and then also the advent of social media didn't actually make it any easier. People are doing such strange things, let's not name what they are, to really upkeep that lifestyle. It's not sustainable, right? And it's, again, not having clear money goals around what's important. If, for example, you've got your short-term, medium-term, and long-term money goals, where retirement planning is part of your long-term money goals, and you're clear as to what the contribution level needs to be for you to have a comfortable retirement, it actually bypasses a lot of that wasteful expenditure. But again, if you know you've got a weakness around expenditure or taking on unnecessary debt, then you are prized to actually take up a financial advisor as soon as possible to actually help you, guide you along the way.
All right, we're going to continue the conversation in a moment. It's 10:30. Time for your latest news headlines.
Very good morning to you with the news headlines. A study by the Human Sciences Research Council has shown that South Africa is experiencing severe food insecurity across the country, contrary to the view that South Africa enjoys food security at a national level. The ANC says it is working on taking control of the Tshwane Metro following its successful installation of Dada Morero as the City of Joburg mayor. And former U.S. Republican Congressman George Santos has pleaded guilty to identity theft and fraud charges as part of a plea deal with federal prosecutors. Details of these and other stories coming up at 11.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand is currently trading at 17 rand 77 to the dollar, 23 rand 12 to the pound, and 19 rand 71 to the euro. Markets in Asia were mixed at the closing bell. The JC is mixed in mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are mainly higher this hour. Gold is trading at $2,515, platinum $958 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $77.03 a barrel.
The Serengeti, located on the northern part of Tanzania, bordering Kenya on the north and Ngorongoro in the south. Home to the African Big Five and millions of zebras, birds and other predators. Serengeti 2 returns to the unspoiled corner of the Serengeti for more animal drama. There's humor, heartbreak and nail-biting tension as new characters move in and familiar faces continue their stories. Channel your inner adventurer with Serengeti 2, Sundays at 6 p.m. only on S3. Open up.
Reigning champions, the Citizens fully get it that early wins in the league serves you right when pressure kicks in.
On it goes to Foden, 2-0! The master marksman, Phil Foden, you absolute beauty!
However, the Tractor Boys believe they have what it takes to prevail in the Big Boys League.
Burns again, another opportunity, it burns!
This is the Premier League. Catch the exciting battle between Manchester City FC and Ipswich Town FC on Saturday 24 August at 3 p.m. Live on SABC3 and at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Also available on sabcsport.com. #We love it here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
#SFM Talking Point. Talking finance, making sense of your finance.
Luthando Mzilikazi is in for Brian Hirsch this morning. We're talking retirement readiness and what we need to start doing today to prepare for retirement. As she's talked us through the three groups of people and says that, we really don't want to find ourselves as one of these groups, that is young people who are under contributing to retirement funds, older people who time has gone by and looking back and regret and, but it's a bit too late. And also those who are in industries like my industry who work on a job-to-job basis, don't necessarily have employment benefits. And if you're not intentional about saving for retirement, then you end up with, what we see all the time, where you'll have somebody that the whole country knows, has respected for a long time, but when they die, their families are saying, exactly, we've got nothing, please help us bury this person, because all of that too comes down to planning. So, Luthando, I've got a question here from Anonymous in Bloemfontein who says, Cathy, I'm a 50-year-old public servant and I don't have a retirement plan. At this age, is there still hope for me to start with some kind of retirement plan?
Sure. At least these kinds of conversations have woken him up to a reality that he needs to do something. So that's a good first step. He is very much able to start a voluntary RA from any service provider that has an investment administrative platform. I don't know if I'm able to name some of them as an example.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
All right, like Alan Gray, like 91, they can definitely, call them up and find out what the process is. But the most important thing is, now that he's awakened to the reality of how stark things can be into retirement if he doesn't have a plan, he needs to do something about it and just pick up the phone, call Alan Gray, call 91 and find out, how he can get started.
Perhaps one of the other things that's often less understood is the tax benefit
Yep.
of having retirement savings. And the world of tax is such a murky world. I'm yet to meet somebody who hears the word tax and jumps up and down and says, yay, I love taxes, I love doing taxes, I love paying taxes, because it can also be so complex, right?
Yeah.
Even when it's e-filing season, I don't know about you, but there's very few things I dread more than having to remember my login details, and I'm just like, what is going on right now? So, but there are incredible tax benefits for those who actually have retirement funds.
100%. I mean, just on the forgetfulness of the logins, I outsourced that functionality completely to my CASA sister, because I'm just like, I don't want to get involved. So I mean, yes, as you rightfully say, I mean, there are multitudes of benefits to actually having a retirement fund. The first, obviously, is that you have an annuity stream into retirement when you're no longer working, but also the tax benefits. So when it comes to tax, the easiest way to think about the best benefit around having a retirement fund around tax is to look at your payslip. So your payslip actually has your retirement contribution, prior to your tax being charged. So if the higher you pay in terms of your contribution levels, the lower your taxable income will be, and the lower the rand amount you'll pay towards tax. What people also don't understand is the asymmetrical benefit of this tax advantage. So just because you'll increase your contribution by 5% as an example doesn't mean that your tax saving increases by 5%, increases by more. So it actually works in your favor if you do the calculation. So I urge everyone listening to actually do exactly that. The other thing is that the growth on your contributions are not taxed. So actually, depending on the returns of the funds that you're actually invested in, they are actually growing based on a bigger level of contributions because there's no tax on those contributions. Then the last thing that is very important is that the retirement fund offers this tax-free environment for your contributions to grow at the highest contribution level available. The tax-free account is obviously another one on a discretionary basis, but that's maxed at 36,000 Rand per tax year. The retirement fund product itself, on the other hand, is maxed at 350,000 Rand contributions per tax year. So if you really want to maximize on that tax shield and tax benefit, the best way to do it is through that retirement fund.
But already, Luthando, sometimes when, let's say, people are contributing to retirement funds, when you see it increase, and there are those annual increases, sometimes you're like, but that means less in my pocket. It's less for today. And that's often what people are looking at, right? I want more for today and not necessarily thinking about tomorrow.
So let's talk about that quantitatively, because I think people have that myth in their heads, but not enough of those people who are talking about it and having those conversations at Bryce have actually done the calculation themselves. So I urge everyone who's listening and is concerned about this exact topic to actually ask their HR person to send them their payslip calculator, because you have access to that. What you can do is take exactly what your contributions and deductions are and then compare it to a changed contribution level. So for example, what I prepared for today is like two people who are earning 500,000 Rand as an annual package. The one contributes 10%, the other contributes 15% towards retirement. The difference between the net pay of these two individuals, if all things stay the same, besides their contribution levels, is 1,500. And yet the difference in the contribution level towards retirement is 2,500. Sure. So actually, by contributing more towards your retirement doesn't mean that you lose out on net pay at an equivalent level because of that tax shield that's in the middle there.
So what does this mean, Luthando? We should all be going to our HR officers saying, take a bit more towards retirement fund.
100%. I mean, that's the urge. That's the action point. It sounds really hard to do, but like everything that we take on as expenses and put it on a debit order level takes 2 to 3 months to adjust your lifestyle to your new contribution levels. It goes back to the conversation around the retirement calculator, finding what your optimal contribution level is relative to how much longer you have until retirement age, and then executing on that number by talking to someone from HR, seeing what that net number looks like on your bank account, and what that would do in terms of your retirement savings would be so powerful.
So I guess the other thing that's coming out of this conversation is perhaps breaking down the walls that exist between employees and their HR officers?
Yes.
Because most people don't want to find themselves at HR having any conversation really. And you are saying to us that we must actually start giving the HR people some work to do. Go to them and say, look, I have an exercise, work with me through it. Is that part of their job though? Are they, can they say no and say, no, actually, I don't want to do these calculations with you. Take what you get and move on.
So some companies actually have what they call an EAP, which is basically an external service provider that helps with overall financial and employee wellness. So HR generally, if they're not equipped to handle those conversations, they kind of outsource you to that free service that the company already pays for, and invertedly you kind of pay for. So utilize that service because it is in aid of your own retirement outcomes.
All right, so we're getting some serious education here. I was today years old. That's what the 2000s say, right? I was today years old when I discovered that you can go to your HR department, sit down with them, and work out your retirement calculations. And if you're not happy, recalculate them. I thought that whatever you get is what you get, that there's no room for negotiation necessarily. So you've taught me something new today, Lutando.
So there's a slight nuance. So if you're a public sector pension fund member, that is given because you work on a defined benefit scheme. So your outcomes are predetermined. So you work on years of service as your contribution. So there you can't change much. But if you're working for the public sector and there you actually can change your contribution levels, there's a lot that you can actually do.
Absolutely. All right. So as we're still talking retirement and we've touched on the young people, what young people need to be doing today, perhaps back to the question that the 50-year-old public servant asked us earlier. I'm close to retirement age. What are my options?
So definitely the one around setting up a voluntary RA is one. I think the other would be to have some kind of additional income stream that would service the supplementary income into retirement. I think there's a lot of things and variables that I don't know about this caller, is he currently working? Because a lot of people are closer to retirement age, but actually they're not working. And in that instance, there's not much that can be done other than them, deciding to go back to work or, deciding to start some kind of business to actually create that income stream that will enable them to contribute towards a retirement fund. For people who are working and are close to the retirement age and actually have retirement assets, there's a couple of benefits of actually, really looking at that retirement plan that they have quite seriously, especially as they get closer to that retirement age. The first is that even if you have a side business, for example, let's say, for example, end up taking some kind of loan to grow the business. If you find yourself in a situation like COVID where you're unable to repay that loan, your retirement fund is actually safe from creditors. They can't attach any of your loans or your defaults to your retirement fund. So it's actually quite a good pot of money to have to protect yourself from creditors, but also from yourself. Remember, the pension funds act, has a couple of rules around when you can access, to what extent you can access, and now even Two-Pot actually serves to assist with that, because a lot of people were, as I said earlier, really resigning from work and taking all of their retirement assets and just literally splurging it or reducing debt that they're going to take up again anyway.
Yeah, Lutando, we don't want to be protected from our retirement savings. We want them now. We want them now.
So that's why you've got the savings pot as part of the Two-Pot system, which I heard Brian went into extensively 2 weeks ago, so I won't go into that. There is, though, another benefit to having a retirement plan, even as a person who's about to retire. So let's say you're now ready to take your retirement package. You get that 550,000 Rand tax-free. And there's no other product that will give you that amount of money in one go tax-free. The second is, if you're smart and you listen to these kinds of conversations and you go and act out and execute on the plans that we kind of give you nuggets on, and you've set up a tax-free account, on the side, in addition to a retirement plan, what you can then end up doing is actually reduce your marginal tax rate that you'll pay, or rather reduce the tax rand amount that you'll pay towards SARS when you've actually retired. Because one, in your retirement age, you're getting a lower income than what you did before you retire. Let's say the month before you retired. But secondly, you can supplement the income that you get from your retirement annuity or your living annuity or your guaranteed annuity once you've actually taken your retirement decision with your tax-free accounts withdrawal. So you can actually set up a regular withdrawal, and that amount of money every month that you get won't be taxed. Only the amount that you get through your annuity stream, which is your living annuity, guaranteed, or your hybrid annuity, will be taxed. So actually, you have the split funding annuity stream, but only one is taxed and the other isn't. So if you're really wise, you can actually enjoy the benefits of this retirement fund.
I guess it's also up to us to understand the benefits so that it makes sense for us why we need to take them up. So despite all of these advantages, Lutando, we still have a situation where many South Africans, of course, under contribute, and it also has to do with understanding why this is happening. What are the goals that we should have in mind when we think about retirement planning, really?
This is where the independent financial advisor actually comes into play, because what they can do for you is kind of do a mock-up budget on what your post-retirement or into retirement budget could look like, and that's when you can begin to understand and come to grasp with the realities of how much you need on a monthly basis to actually survive into retirement, just to maintain your current lifestyle. That's the first thing. The second thing is understand the kind of life you want to give your children, both while you are still alive and when you're no longer alive. I think as mothers, we like to think of ourselves as people who are immortal. We will live forever. We'll look after our cubs forever. But the day will come when we no longer can. The retirement annuity or your retirement plan, even when you retire, can actually protect your children. So case in point, when you retire, you move from a retirement product that is governed by the Pension Funds Act, which kind of, how your assets are distributed depends on the Section 37C part of the Pension Funds Act, which is up to the discretion of the trustees. So your nominated beneficiaries, which you would have filled out on the nomination form, are just simply that. They're nominations, they are your wishes, but the ultimate distribution depends on those trustees. However, when you've got that retirement plan and you decide to retire and then you pass on after that, those assets are now governed under the Long-Term Insurance Act. And now you fill out a beneficiary form and no longer a nomination form. So you've got a more guaranteed base of what's going to happen to your children once you've retired around your retirement annuity. And I think this is actually even more important given that most South Africans only have a retirement plan as their investment structure.
What are the don'ts of retirement funds? So what should we not be doing in as far as it relates to our retirement funds, and what can we do to better cushion ourselves to protect the assets that we spend our lives building?
Number one, as 1st of September hits, please don't be tempted to just take that money. Unless you are seriously in a financial corner, it should be worst case scenario, because that is almost similar to every time you resign, you take all of the money. It's the same kind of concept. So it's literally meant for emergency. So don't take that money from the 1st of September if you're able to cope financially. Secondly, every time you change jobs, do ensure that you preserve those retirement assets, either with your fund or with an independent platform like Allen Gray or 91. Thirdly, while you are actually contributing, don't try and under-contribute because you're fitting your lifestyle. You're fitting your retirement contribution towards your lifestyle. It should be your retirement contribution first, and then you fit your lifestyle around that. And then once you've kind of settled in your retirement contribution levels and you know that it's in par in terms of the kind of retirement you want to have, then don't be modest and conservative around the funds that you choose. Women more than men are more likely to actually be invested in moderate funds, which typically are stable funds, and they have about 40% max allowance in growth assets like equities. What you want is, because the retirement plan is actually quite a long journey, is to be maximized on your allocations towards equities, because that gives you your 10%, 12% average annual returns, and that you can get through a balanced fund or an equity fund or through feeder funds. Whereas through a stable fund, which you spoke to earlier, your return expectations are around 7 to 8%. And then you still have to deduct the administration fee of the platform that's actually administering your fund. And if you have a financial advisor, you still have to pay the advisor fee on those assets. So to increase your purchasing power in the future and to really stretch the power of your contributions, really try to be more in balanced funds and feeder funds than stable funds.
I guess the research shows that women are less risk averse, right? We want stability.
More risk averse.
Yes, well, more risk averse. Thanks for that. We want stability. So now Lutando is saying, leave the conservatism alone, especially if you're saving for the long run, rather than rather just go out there and But if I want to make sure that the 1,000 rand I put in, I'm going to get back, then it becomes a challenge, isn't it?
100%. But remember, you're investing that 1,000 rand for a 40-year horizon, for a 20-year horizon, depending on where you're at. And the stats show that even though equities does have that up and down movement, it does generally recover quite quickly and quite asymmetrically. So it actually gains more than it's actually lost. But actually, it's also proven that the biggest risk that you'll be taking with regards to a retirement fund is not planning correctly and not taking enough growth assets. That's your biggest risk.
Okay. Mrs. Radebe, you're calling us from Port Shepstone. Good morning to you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you, ma'am.
I'm good. I'm not sure. It's about the pension fund. I retired in April. Then on May, it was my first month at home.
Mm-hmm.
And on the 28th of May, my file left employer to GEPF. Then it took 1 month with the employer. Then after that, it went to GEPF. After a month, when it was on process, after a month, the file was returned back to the employer. They said there was a problem with a salary adjustment. That was the mistake from the employer. It took about a week from the employer. I went there, nobody called me from GEPF, nobody called me from my HR, which is the Department of Health. Then I found out from the app that I downloaded that my file is back. It went back to the employer. Then I went to the hospital. I inquired about my file coming back to them. They said, no, we didn't call you because it was our mistake. It's not your fault. You did everything right, but it was our fault. Why my file takes so long again? Then they said, it's because the supervisor was not there. She was on leave. The file will be leaving next week.
So, Mrs. Radebe, I don't mean to rush you, but what is the issue that you're facing now?
The issue now, it's more than, it's 4 months full. I haven't get paid from EGPF. I haven't get my money. And my file kept on going back to the employer and back to EGPF. And they said the last time it came back from the employer, it was on the 6th of August. Then they said it's gonna take from that 6th. It's gonna take from the 6th. It's gonna take another 60 days.
Are you withdrawing your money, Mrs. Radebe?
Withdrawn?
Yes.
I retired from. It was. I resigned. I haven't get any cent from EGPF.
Yes, that I understand. So what I'm asking you is, what was the instruction that you gave? Did you choose to have those funds preserved, or did you choose to withdraw those that retirement
I
fund?
choose to withdraw my funds.
Okay, and you want all of it basically.
I wanted all of my
Okay.
money.
And what industry are you in, Mrs. Radebe, if you don't mind my asking?
Sorry?
What industry are you in?
What
industry? What do you do? What were you resigning
okay.
from?
I'm working for Department of Health. I'm a nurse.
Oh, you're a nurse. Okay, all right. Okay, Lutando?
So I think, Cathy, one of the most important things that I think we can take from this lesson from Umama, because I think what she's saying is she has resigned, but she's actually taken all her money, but she's been going through months without an income that she had anticipated. And this is the value of having an independent financial advisor. So making those decisions in cognizant and in unison with a financial advisor is very important, because the tax she would have paid to actually get that money is outstandingly hectic. So given her age, I'm kind of guessing she's around her 50s. When you actually take all your money like that, you are actually wiping out 10 years worth of pensionable service. So when you're actually happy to, lose all your 10 years worth of hard work and sweat and tears, you kind of take that withdrawal. But some people who actually do the withdrawal don't know the tax implications. Secondly, I think if she had a financial advisor, what she would have had is the financial advisor, if they are a good one, they would have proactively communicated with the GPAA, which is the administrative platform that administers the pension fund for GPF, so that she doesn't have to go through the heartache as she is now.
And Mrs. Radebe, just to ask, did you get any advice at all around what to do with your retirement funds?
No, I haven't got any advice.
And what do you want to use the money for?
I was actually wanted to open a private business.
Okay.
With that, I do have information, and I have all the advice. Everything is in order with that. The problem now is that I don't get I'm not getting money from the
GEPF.
From the employer. Yes.
Okay. Look. Because we've been getting quite a number of calls about issues at the GPF, and I think this is also something that we started off with Brian. Maybe we can pick it up with him to see what the issues at the GEPF is. But I would still say, Mrs. Radebe, try and sit down with a financial advisor and really map out what it is that you're going to need for your new business that you want to set up, and what the best sort of way to do it might be, especially from a tax perspective too.
I think, Cathy, it's a bit late on the tax perspective, because the withdrawal sounds like it's been instructed. The directive is already out there.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that she can do going forward is kind of hedge her bets, because if she's using all that money to start this business, that's a one-way bet, and you need to diversify. So what she needs to do is she can take the portion that she absolutely needs to start this business, and the rest she can actually approach an Allen Gray, a 91, and set up a preservation fund, so that at least some of that money is actually preserved. That's number one. And number two, once it's preserved, she still has a one-time withdrawal opportunity at any point in time. But at least if she preserves a portion continues to grow tax-free, and she still has the liquidity of that one withdrawal when she needs it.
All right. Mrs. Radebe, I hope that advice helps. Thanks for calling in. And I think her story, it's so many South Africans find themselves in that position. I'm going to squeeze this one in around those that are self-employed.
Hi there, Lunga, Western Cape. Hope everyone is well. I would like you to ask your guest, the financial coach, with regards to, we tend to find that a lot of these financial institutes are holding on to funds of deceased individuals where the estate has been wound up, and the executor or the children or beneficiaries didn't know that there were certain policies outside of what they were told. Can she comment on how to go about investigating that and finding out whether there are monies? I have an uncle who passed away, and there's a query. Anyway, thank you. Cheers.
All right, Lutando?
That is a death claim benefit, and many service providers actually struggle with this. The multiple reasons why they can't access the beneficiaries. Sometimes it's as simple as they don't have the contact details that are updated. So please approach the administration platform of the pension fund that you know your parents actually had or your spouse had, and go and actually go and avail yourself so as to actually help them through their death claims benefit process.
So there's no central database that you can go to where you can put in, let's say, somebody's details and it can show you these are the funds that they were invested in.
I think that is an action point for the industry, but nothing exists currently.
Okay. All right. Luthando, thank you so much for making time for us. How can people get in touch?
Moneyviews_SA, Moneyviews_SA on TikTok and Instagram, and then Luthando Mzilikazi on Facebook.
Thank you so much for coming into studio. It's just after 11 o'clock. Time for your latest news update.
The top stories this hour: John Hlophe dealt another legal blow and the ANC sets its sights on the Tshwane Metro. Very good morning to you. Dr. John Hlophe's bid for direct access to the Constitutional Court challenging his possible impeachment has failed. The now impeached Judge President of the Western Cape High Court turned to the Concourt earlier this year ahead of the National Assembly vote on his impeachment. The Apex Court has issued an order which found that his application does not engage the court's exclusive jurisdiction and that no case has been made for direct access. Kenny Mapanga has more.
Dr. Hlophe asked the court to, among other things, order that it was unconstitutional for Parliament not to develop rules for the impeachment of judges. He also wanted the Concourt to order Parliament to develop rules for judicial impeachment, which must include a full inquiry that must have an evidence leader, witnesses, and the judge to make his submissions. In February 2024, the National Assembly vote went ahead after the filing, with 305 MPs voting in favour of his impeachment. Kenny Mapanga, SABC News, Johannesburg.
A Human Sciences Research Council study has shown that South Africa is experiencing severe food insecurity, contrary to the view that the country enjoys food security at a national level. The HSRC says over 43,000 households were sampled in each district in the country since 2019. It says the KZN government requested the survey, the first of its kind since 1994, because the Agriculture Department wanted to see if its various interventions are having the expected impact. The Council's Professor Thokozani Simelane will be handing over the study to the provincial government at an agricultural indaba in Durban today.
You'll find that contrary to what had been believed on, that the urban areas are better off than the rural areas, in reality the urban areas are very much affected by food insecurity because the land available for the household is limited and they have limited means of producing their own food. Whereas in rural areas on the other side, there is plenty of land, but the agricultural activities and production have been abandoned.
The ANC says it is working on taking control of the Tshwane Metro following its successful installation of Dada Morero as the City of Joburg mayor. Speaking at a media briefing following the party's Gauteng Lekgotla at the weekend, Provincial Secretary TK Ngciza says the move to reclaim Tshwane was motivated by the poor services that residents are subjected to under the DA-led mayor, Silius Brink.
We are looking at Tshwane. We believe there will be changes in Tshwane in no time, and we are engaging with HNSA and all other parties about Tshwane and its future. And the national office is aware of what I'm telling you. But we have not concluded anything at this point. And I think on numbers, I'm sure, like I've explained, we are engaging with all the parties. So the numbers are there. The numbers are there, and we know exactly what needs to happen for us to get where we need to go.
3 suspects have been arrested for the recent burglary at the SAPS base at Forêt in Cape Town. Police say riot control ammunition and a gas canister launcher were stolen from the base's storeroom over a week ago. The stolen items were discovered next to Baden-Powell Drive in the city. Police spokesperson Andre Trout says 2 men and a woman will appear in the Blue Downs Magistrates Court soon.
Kleinvlei detectives joined forces with the anti-gang unit to probe the circumstances surrounding a brazen incident where non-lethal ammunition and a gas canister launcher were stolen. The investigation led the team to various locations in and around Kleinvlei. The 2 men face charges for housebreaking and theft, while the female will be charged with the possession of stolen goods. A small quantity of ammunition is yet to be recovered.
And former U.S. Republican Congressman George Santos has pleaded guilty to identity theft and fraud charges as part of a plea deal with federal prosecutors. He was expelled from the House of Representatives last December and faces up to 8 years behind bars. The BBC's Nada Taufik.
George Santos burst onto the political scene after he flipped an affluent New York district for Republicans in 2022. But the 36-year-old's career quickly unraveled after it emerged that he had fabricated his biography and after he was indicted on dozens of federal charges, including lying about his finances to the Federal Election Commission, applying for unemployment benefits to which he was not entitled, and stealing from campaign donors. It's alleged he spent the funds on Botox treatments, luxury goods, vacations, and pornography.
The top story at 11, Dr. John Hlophe's bid for direct access to the Constitutional Court challenging his possible impeachment has failed. For SAFM News, Kemudupi Khalemeli.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide, leading the conversation.
The Serengeti, located on the northern part of Tanzania, bordering Kenya on the north and Ngorongoro in the south. Home to the African Big Five and millions of zebras, birds and other predators. Serengeti 2 returns to the unspoiled corner of the Serengeti for more animal drama. There's humor, heartbreak and nail-biting tension as new characters move in and familiar faces continue their stories. Channel your inner adventurer with Serengeti 2, Sundays at 6 p.m. only on S3. Open up.
Borussia Dortmund understands the delight that comes with triumphing the opening clash of the league race. But Eintracht Frankfurt are not about dropping points this early. They want to complete their visit to Signal Iduna Park with 3 incredible points. This is the Bundesliga. Football as it's meant to be. Catch the hot contest between Borussia Dortmund and Eintracht Frankfurt on Saturday, 24 August at 6:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Also available on sabcsport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Sakina, you know we are vindicated as the Patriotic Alliance because at local level we have always said that the DA is very arrogant, is very rude, it wants to be the boss.
And this is very unsettling. If it's unsettling for us as politicians, it's also unsettling for the citizens. And you can actually feel the crispness in the air, Sakina, that the people are tense.
Deputy President Kenny Kunene, and we also have African Christian Democratic Party's spokesperson in Gauteng, Bishop Dalton Adams.
Sakina Kamwendo on SAFM. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Cathy, the advice I have for Julius is simple. Let us give Julius space to grieve. Julius must not miss any stage of grieving. You don't want this coming back at him when he's 60. This is your boy Limpopo Peter.
Good morning, Sis Cathy. My advice to Julius Malema will be in the form of this African adage that says, you must also read Matthew 7, 3 to 5. That is my advice for him. Jimmy Wopa from Khobokan. Thanks.
Good morning, SA listeners. To Julius Malema, everyone comes into your life for a reason and a season. Unfortunately, Floyd's time was up in the EFF. Julius, you need to sit back and you need to think how you're going to resolve this. My advice is you need to change your attitude, the way you speak. There is no revolution in South Africa, and we don't need freedom fighters. You need to be more friendly to lots of people. You don't have to suck up to them, but you have to be honest, truthful, and be a good leader. Thank you.
Good morning, Sis Cathy and SAFM listeners. I've been listening this entire morning from Oliver to you about the exodus of Floyd Chivambo. The only conclusion is that Julius is very hurt and very sorrowful. Dwell in Kimberley.
Good day, Cathy. Cathy, Floyd Chibambo has made a very powerful decision of leaving EFF. Nobody, even I myself, I won't allow myself to be led by a leader like Julius Malema, who criticizes everybody, including journalists. Yesterday he was attacking Xolim Gati for no reasons. And I can tell you, once Julius criticizes you, you must know that you are a good and a powerful journalist. Xoli must continue doing his wonderful job because he's a pain to the EFF. Thank you, Lucas Mahlangu, Mpumalanga and Rai.
Advice for Juju: do some work on the ground. Go to Eastern Cape, see hungry kids on the road asking for food. Go and help truck drivers in Umtata who are being extorted by these criminals who are extorting money from truck drivers, robbing them their tires. Go and do some work on the ground. Maybe you'll get some votes.
Cathy, there is no advice for Julius. There is no advice at all. Julius, Mr. Know-it-all. Julius, Mr. Everything. Julius, Mr. himself. Julius will wake up after he was left by the entire family, and even by that time when it comes, he will say abahamba bahambayo so sala sincenga eseyedwa endlini.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
SAFM is celebrating its 88th birthday, and what better way to celebrate than with you, our loyal listener. We will be giving away 8,800 to 10 lucky listeners during the month of August. To stand a chance of winning, stay tuned to SAFM and SMS the keyword SAFM88 followed by your name to 41391 and listen to the station throughout the day, where you could be selected as a winner. SMSs are charged at R1.50 per SMS. Free SMSs and SMS bundles do not apply.
Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday, happy.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue the conversation on the Talking Point, and for the final hour of the show, our final conversation, sitting across from me is Eleanor Sisulu. She is an author, human rights activist, and really is somebody who's made a significant contribution in terms of being a voice, I think, often for women in the literature space and telling the stories of women. Good morning, and thank you so much for coming into studio.
Good morning, Cathy. Great to see you after a long time.
It has been a while.
Yes.
I was saying to the listeners earlier on that the reason why it's important for us to talk about the stories of women is that when we look at our history, it was very intentional that women were written out of the history books, that there's an erasure of their contributions, whether to our struggle, whether to our societies. And I wonder how somebody like you that has been politically active or coming from a political family has reckoned with that, especially being an author yourself.
Well, it's part of one's experience growing up, in both the colonial society where histories of black people were erased, and then in a patriarchal society where women's stories tend to get erased. And as a biographer, as you know, I wrote the biography of Mama and Tata Sisulu. I was very careful. I learned that there is a tradition of biography that ensures that women's stories are told, because and there's a way of doing it, that you have to do it intentionally, because history is often the stories of great men. So I think there's been a lot of progress, and we have a lot of women who are writing, and new writers coming up, and I think we have some amazing women writers. I've had the pleasure to support Barbara Masekela, Sis Barbara, in her work, where she had this obsession that she wants to start a women's literary festival, and it started, I'm losing the years now, 2023 was the second edition, 2022 supported by University of Johannesburg, and it was really an eye-opener as to how much passion and interest there is, and that there was a multi-generational group of women that came, but also the quality of women's writing and the work that they have produced. Last year we had Margaret Busby, who is a great African publisher, who was one of the first black women to own a publishing company in the UK. And she's published this compilation, Daughters of Africa, which looks at women's writing, writing of women from Africa and the diaspora. And it's like an encyclopedia. So there's a lot of work out there. I think the challenge is getting that work read, having it in our schools, having it in our universities, and that people are aware of just what range of work that has been produced.
Is it a question of appetite amongst the population when it comes to distributing these works widely? Because if you think about it, on a station like SAFM, we constantly hear listeners who are advocating for our stories to be told, for history, for books to be available, so that not just the present generations but coming generations can read and understand our history, our context more thoroughly. So where is the disconnect between the work that is already taking place, run by people like yourselves and other like-minded individuals, versus now where it has that multiplier effect and is able to reach the masses?
Yeah, I think we have a disjuncture in our society, and I think, Ali Mazrui, the great African intellectual, said that I'll paraphrase, he didn't say it this way exactly, but I'll simplify. He said the problem with Africa is that we don't consume what we produce, and we don't produce what we consume. And that applies very much to literature, where if you look at our bookshops, and you won't find African literature. There's a few bookshops like Book Circle, Capital, where you find our books, but generally the biggest book chains have our books are.
There's a little corner
There's
somewhere.
a little corner somewhere.
Yeah.
And despite efforts to change this, it has changed. It has not changed really. But I think in terms of government support as well, because if you look, most countries have governments have deliberately supported the whole literary ecosystem and the book chain. Whereas here we don't have that sustained support. We have it in bits and pieces. So it's very difficult to get ongoing support for literary programs. And I think for women also, to be able to write, to take yourself and do a sustained piece of writing, you do need financial support, because if you decide you're going to write your novel now, Cathy, I mean, where are you going to earn that bread and butter that makes you pay your rent and feed you from day to day and send your children to school? And so literature, great literature, writers have been supported through the ages, and there's always been the struggle, especially by women, to get the kind of support that they need to do the writing, because you have to separate yourself and have some means. So I think, but also I think we also don't intentionally sustain our literary traditions, and this is where I must pay tribute to Comrade Rax, as I call him, Murakabe Siakwa of Sala, because Rax has been like the soldier of promoting literature and did a lot to promote the works of Miriam Tladi and Loretta Ngobo. But these books are still not prescribed in schools. I mean, there's a whole issue of prescription in schools and budgets that are dedicated to purchasing of literature. And this is a whole discussion we have. I sit on a reading panel convened by former Deputy President Phumzile Ngcuka. And just this past week we were meeting with the Deans of Education around the reading crisis. And part of the reading crisis that we're facing is just the lack of availability of materials, but also I think there's a notion that there's not enough material and we have to create more, and yet there's no stock taking of what actually exists and how do we better promote it and make sure that it's available. Because every high school child should have come across the works of Miriam Tladi, of Loretta Ngobo, Sindiwe Magona. I mean, there's a whole Gina Mhlope, there's a whole pantheon of writers in all languages that should be promoted. Their works should be available. They should be made available in libraries, and that the question: how does a writer also sustain their livelihoods?
You're raising such an important part of the conversation, because at the end of the day, whatever craft that one is applying themselves to, they have to be able to make a living out of it. When we look at structurally then what happens in the process of writing books and putting them together, it requires quite a lot of research as well, right? So the author is researching, and then they have to write, and then of course in between there are all of the challenges that they have to go through. But how is it possible, Eleanor, that if somebody is writing a book on Barack Obama, it will be available on shelves literally within a 6-month period between the time he leaves office and when the biography is ready. And in fact, you'll have quite a number of them ready. But it's a struggle when it comes to other genres. What's the driving factor behind that?
Well, I don't think it's a struggle about biography. I mean, if you taking the example of Barack Obama, the U.S. has a lot more support for writers. You know, there's a lot more respect for the literary output, and people get grants, they get writing residencies. The universities are more affluent and they can support residencies. Writing residencies are important, especially for women, because it takes you away from family and family responsibilities and gives you the time and space to write. So there's I think a bigger literary culture and an industry and a respect for the publishing industry than we have here. We have a lot of problems. I mean, for example, we have a copyright law. Oh, well, it still has to be signed by the president, but it's a copyright law that is actually it's a threat to publishing. And despite protests by writers, the Publishers Association and all that, the politicians went through with this thing. And they go through with it for reasons that, you know, we can only guess at, that the people who want to make our books freely available, and that's a tension also between the West and the South, where there are entities in the West who say knowledge must be available free, you must put it digitally, Google wants to put all the books out there. But at the same, and so copyright laws must be changed to make this possible. Meanwhile, how do writers earn their money? How do they earn a living? And not to get rich, there are very few writers who become rich. And I work in the children's literature space. I mean, if you decide to make a living writing children's books, you can make sure you're going to be a pauper and you're not going to pay your bills. That's the reality. And yet you have many women who see that my children need books which are culturally appropriate, relevant to their context. And it's great to see that there are young women who are writing, young mothers who decide that I want to write the books my children need. And they're starting to do that. And that's very encouraging. But at the same time, the soil is not fertile to receive those wonderful seeds and let them grow into great trees. And that's what we're doing at the Puku Children's Literature Foundation, building a platform to have children's books in all languages and to make them easily accessible. And we've struggled to get the resources to do that. I think we are on the verge of a breakthrough, and hopefully our platform will be ready in the next couple of months, and hopefully it will make a difference to the whole literary ecosystem as far as children's books are concerned. But we struggle. We just don't get the kind of sustained support that we need.
I want to talk more about what you're doing in terms of children's literature on the other side of the latest headlines. Before we get to that, perhaps just staying with this issue of accessibility and the challenges that often present themselves for authors, for publishing houses. We're recently reviewing some research that showed that you do have more parents today talking about reading to their children, that they are actively trying to create a culture of reading. But somewhere along the line, it sort of falls off the wagon, right? So I think it was at primary school level is when the survey showed the numbers then just start to go down again. Is this because of issues of access to books in different languages? Why do you think we see this? Because the intent on the part of the parents, especially younger parents, seemingly is there.
Yes, what we've seen is that there is a convergence of three challenges that we have in our society. I'm speaking specifically of South Africa, but I think it applies in most African countries. Is that you have the literacy and reading challenge, where people don't have enough books, they don't have access. There's a disjuncture between books which are published and books which people receive in schools. So that there's that literacy challenge. And how children learn reading in schools, the challenge to the public schools, some of which are not to do with pedagogy, but to do with things like safety in school, not having the right infrastructure, large teacher-pupil ratio. So there's a whole range of things that affect reading in schools. But then there's another intersecting problem, and that's access to the digital space. So just as you have a literacy divide, you have a digital divide, where people in materially deprived communities have less access to data, and even if they get access to the internet, they're challenged by access to data. Students, especially from materially deprived families or backgrounds, have a problem accessing data. Say like they'll be at university and they'll be working. When they go home, there's no access to data there. So there's and the whole issues around digitally, how our languages are marginalized. Then the third thing is the general neglect of our languages. In South Africa and to varying degrees on the rest of the continent, there's no deep political consciousness on governments. They say the right things, they can have the right policies, but the budgets aren't there to ensure that people working in our languages get paid. So that's a whole issue. So these things converge and make it give us the result we have today, where we do have problems in access to works that children should be reading, young adults should be reading on the one hand, and the people that have produced those works which are sidelined and not made available to them.
All right. We're going to continue the conversation with Eleanor Sisulu after the latest news headlines.
A very good morning with the news headlines. Dr. John Hlophe's bid for direct access to the Constitutional Court challenging his possible impeachment has failed. Gauteng Health is facing a significant payment backlog, having failed to settle more than 19,000 invoices within a 30-day period. And a Human Sciences Research Council study has shown that South Africa is experiencing severe food insecurity, contrary to the view that the country enjoys food security at a national level. Details of these and other stories coming up at midday.
Upgrade your TV game with the SABC TV License Rewards. It's your golden ticket to VIP treatment. Imagine signing up at sabctvlicenserewards.co.za, breezing through a few steps, and bam! Instant reward, just for being you. Plus, pocket up to 500 Rand back. That's the cherry on top. But wait, it's not just about the cash. We're talking about sweet deals and epic rewards. Think discounts on all your favorite things, from shopping to travel and entertainment. Your payment unlocks a world of fun. So, why wait? Dive into the excitement. Join the SABC's TV License Rewards at sabctvlicenserewards.co.za. Hit those buttons and watch your TV experience level up. T's and C's apply. Remember, TV license fees aren't just payments, they make a difference. Tucks have a great plan to illustrate that they are not just intelligent students in class, but on the field of play as well. Meanwhile, the Zuma-based outfit want nothing except for 3 points to run away from the unpleasant zone. The capital city confronts eThekwini. This is the Hollywood Bet Super League. Catch the Mzansi Queens of the beautiful game, University of Pretoria Ladies FC versus Lindelani Ladies FC on Sunday 25 August at 11 a.m. live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We're reflecting on the state of literature in our country, and most importantly, I think the role that women have played really when it comes to writing their own stories and making sure that their voices are represented when it comes to the options of literature that are available. Eleanor Sisulu is an author and human rights activist, and this is something that she is incredibly passionate about. So one of the things that you you have done very actively so over the years is campaign and champion around mother tongue and books available in children's mother tongues, and that comes out of your own experience. So firstly, because we are part of a generation where it's not uncommon to meet a young child in South Africa, a black young child in South Africa today, whose only language is English, and they don't know how to speak any of their indigenous languages. And it is a very difficult space that I know many parents are struggling with navigating through. But it doesn't have to be that way, does it? Are there options that are available to young parents?
Yes, there are solutions. I mean, I grew up in Zimbabwe, then Rhodesia, and we experienced this because that was a colonial situation, and we had a predominantly we had an English education, and so the hegemony of English was enforced through a colonial political situation. But what was said is that post-independence in South Africa, post-freedom, the dominance of English continues, and mainly because of also the digital space. There's a worldwide dominance of English. But I think for as I say, there's not the concomitant investment. If you look at Afrikaans, and I think Afrikaans provides a very interesting lesson. And many people say, yeah, because of apartheid and whatnot. But the fact is there was sustained investment in that language. And Swahili is the other example. There's a sustained investment in Swahili in Tanzania. And you can see what it has done for that language. And we haven't had that for our languages. So what we're trying to do at Puku, and we're working in partnership with UNISA and the National Library of South Africa and EB South Africa and Biblionef, is to produce catalogues of recommended children's books in all the languages. So for each language, getting a group of experts who get together and literally go through what is available and dedicate themselves to do that. And we've done it for isiXhosa, we're doing it for Sesotho, Sepedi. But that is where I say I feel a frustration, because parents of young children like yourselves, you would want to just get on your phone and say, okay, I want a book in Sepedi for my boys. Or if you look at the Olympics, Africa is so dominant in running. And yet this is not reflected in the literature. So you think of a young girl, an athlete in school, would love to read a book about Faith Kipyegon, and it's just not there. So, but then when we try to produce this literature, we struggle with getting funding. We do get funding, but it's not enough. So you apply to produce books in catalogs in 9 languages. And you get this money in drips. But the problem that we have is that, we just don't have the means. And then it's the kind of funding setup where you have to produce evidence of impact. Now, evidence of impact for a literary project doesn't come overnight. It's years of sustained work.
It's a long-term project, yeah.
So, and one of the things I found that just ordinary people can do, is to get into a thing of reviewing books. I think reviewing books is, apart from writing, reviewing books is one of the most important contributions you can give to a literary culture. So we're also working on developing a very strong network of book reviewers in all languages, so that when books come out, they are reviewed extensively. And those reviews on our platform, we will be making these available so that parents can see and say, okay, they don't have to read all the books to be able to. So if you're looking for Sepedi books, as you've said, you then just get a list of 100 recommended books, and it's easy. But for us to do that is quite an investment that we've been working on, and watch the space.
Let's talk about the supply-demand relationship, because with some of the publishers that we've had on the show, often they say, well, we produce works that we know people are looking for. So if we produce something, it doesn't look like there's an appetite for it in the market, then we stop producing that. We focus on what is going to give us the return. So it says that there is a role that consumers can and do play in driving what kind of products are available, especially including for literature.
Yeah, I think our problem is that we don't have a big book buying market. And, you know, I'm also critical of ourselves as a community. Because, you know, a few years ago, and this is quite controversial, and I know I'll receive some flack for this, but I have to say this. You know, there was critique of the Franschhoek Literary Festival, that it was a mostly white festival.
Yes.
It was difficult if you don't have money to go there, and etc., etc. And there was then a response by making a festival in Soweto.
I remember that.
Yes. And there was nothing wrong. There was necessary. It was Abantu Festival, and unfortunately for various reasons, it didn't become sustainable. Franschhoek is sustained by the people that go there and buy the books. And it's a more affluent community, yes. But at the same time, and and mostly white people attend that. But the Franschhoek Wine Festival, there's people that go there, black people that I know, members of my own family. I'm shocked when they said, we're going to Franschhoek for what? The wine festival. You know, and I just felt, but you didn't go for the literary festival.
Yeah.
So I think that notion of buying books, of reviewing books, of taking books seriously is something that we just have to promote more. And I also think South Africa is a country of just the most amazing and gifted artists, really, you know, on a world-class level. And this is acknowledged everywhere. So you have an artist like Sibongile Khumalo, who sadly we lost. There should be a biography about Sibongile. There should be, and this, you know, people shouldn't struggle to say, okay, I want to write a book about Sibongile, I have to find the money, whatnot. We should have that available so that people can do this kind of work. And I think that's, and people should be asking for those books, and when those books are published, then those books get bought. But our book buying market is not big. Our retail market, the booksellers, there's a whole lot of issues with that. And what I can say, what just an ordinary person can do, or an individual, their role would be to make sure you look for the books, you find there's good independent booksellers. Look for the independent booksellers that sell South African books, buy local books, buy African books, and become consumers of our own content. Because when we consume our own content, it means that we encourage and stimulate production of that content.
We're getting ready to wrap up this conversation because we are out of time. Maybe then just a last chance for you to tell us about some of the projects that you're currently working on and what it is that people can do to get involved and support some of those initiatives.
Yes, well, I also just don't want to go away without paying tribute to Professor Mushe Ngondo, who was a great supporter of our work, a great supporter of women's writers, would appear. I remember he came to the Women's Writers Festival and he was so happy and he was so encouraging and affirming. So, you know, the loss of him, and condolences to his wife, Olga, and his family, but to us as a country, because we've lost a great intellectual. And I would say, and I hope to come back to talk more when we've got our platform up and running and it's easily accessible for people. But I would say, in the meantime, it's just good to read local books, look for the books, encourage young people to read. And that's the main thing. And we and also festivals, literary festivals are important. There's a book festival in Limpopo in September. And there's, when there are these festivals, it's important. But I also want to say to our politicians, they just need to pay more attention to this. If you look at the Sharjah Book Fair in Sharjah, when you go to the opening of the Sharjah Book Fair, the Sheikh himself is there, the leader of Sharjah, as well as all the top hierarchy of government. They take it very, very seriously. And we need our politicians to take our books very seriously and our literature seriously.
Eleanor Sisulu, we're going to have to leave it there for this morning. Thank you so much for coming into studio. Of course, we'll be more than happy to host you once the platform is up and running, because I think it will also be one of those avenues that creates so much more access to books to so many people in this country, which is what we need more of. All right, that's where we leave it on the talking point for today. The show back with you again tomorrow between 9 o'clock and midday.
Winners, finalists, fan favorites, and viral sensations from previous seasons of America's Got Talent return to the stage to compete for the All-Star title. Join Heidi Klum, Howie Mandel, and Simon Cowell as they decide who is the best of the best. The creme de la creme, the top dog, is in Tamatota. It's a festival of talent on America's Got Talent All-Stars. Saturdays at 6:30 p.m. on S3. Channel your best entertainment with America's Got Talent All-Stars. Only on S3. Open up.
18 teams are back on the hunting ground. No one wants a loss or a draw. They are all searching for maximum points in every encounter. This is the Bundesliga. Football as it's meant to be. Do not miss out on the 2024-2025 Bundesliga season. Catch the action live on Saturdays at 6:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Also available on sabcsport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
SAFM is celebrating its 88th birthday, and what better way to celebrate than with you, our loyal listener. We will be giving away 8,800 to 10 lucky listeners during the month of August. To stand a chance of winning, stay tuned to SAFM and SMS the keyword SAFM88 followed by your name to 41391 and listen to the station throughout the day, where you could be selected as a winner. SMSs are charged at R1.50 per SMS. Free SMSs and SMS bundles do not apply.
Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday, happy
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
The book reading. Please note that the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SAFM presents another episode of A Life of Purpose, written by Luvuyo Wachela and Lumkile Wiseman Kuhlu. The reader is Lerato Velase.
Dio and Jane also believed that the name Lumkile would endow the newborn with wisdom, ubulumko, and good judgment that would enable him to avoid or overcome the trials of his forefathers and negotiate his way through the challenges the world would throw at him. At the time of Lumkile's birth, there were few opportunities for Africans. It was an epoch of hardship. Dio remembers 1944 as a time of strife. There was conflict in South Africa, and outside the country, there was the Second World War. Many could no longer rely solely on growing crops to make a living, and many did not even have their own land to live on. Dio vividly records the permeating wishful catchphrase at the time of the birth. Lo mntwana uLumkile, uyakuzibonela icebo iingxaki ezifana nezi zisongameleyo. This is a wise child who would devise strategy to deal with the hindrances such as those confronting us. Lumkile's early baptism in the Methodist Church strengthened the meaning of his name. Like many denominational churches tied to Western civilization at the time, the Methodist Church wanted to etch an English name on Lumkile, but Dio refused. When he finally gave in, Dio insisted, "Andinalo elinye igama, ningamnika elesingesi, kodwa ndifuna ibe nguLumkile. I do not have another name. You can give him the English version of Lumkile." That is how the name Wise Man came into being. This well-known story still survives in the Nkuhlu family and was most recently retold by one of Wiseman's younger brothers, Sonwabiso, in 2010 in his tribute to Dio. Lumkile was the name familiar to his parents and close relatives, particularly at home, until it was gradually supplanted by the steady use of Wiseman at school. During Lumkile's early years, the young Nkuhlu family lived in Kala under the custodianship of the Mbulawas who were originally from Mngce. As did other lodging families at the time, the Nkuhlus still accessed historical land from their landlord to supplement Dio's wage from extension work. That arrangement, which enabled a number of tenant families to have access to agrarian resources such as arable and grazing land with blessings from landlords,